After 6 years and still no pregnancy, there must be something wrong with you. I bet that baby you're carrying isn't even mine. My husband, who's been having an affair, assumes that I must be cheating as well. Get out and don't leave a single piece of trash behind. Catherine, jumping on the bandwagon with my husband, eagerly tries to push me out. These two cheaters, having conveniently forgotten their own actions, began to blame me. It's heartbreaking. My husband used to be such a considerate person. But now, he seems to have the same twisted mindset as Catherine, making insensitive comments. But after everything, I have no lingering feelings for him. I'm gonna clean up and move out. With that, I said my goodbyes with a smile. The two of them looked baffled, almost pleased, at my composed departure. My name is Michelle Thompson, a 32-year-old woman juggling work and home duties. I switched to part-time work after marriage, spending my free time on household tasks. My husband's earnings are substantial. We could manage even if I was just a stay-at-home wife, but I like working. So, I chose to continue my job alongside handling the home. Balancing work and home can be tough, but my husband often helped out, so I never felt overwhelmed. Bob, my husband, was my senior in college and is a year older than me. Although we're close in age, he has always been reliable and caring. That's why I was sure I wanted to spend my life with him and decided to marry him. His job seems way busier than mine, with a lot of overtime. Even after marriage, he often came home late. Yet, when at home, he always pitched in with chores, and he cherished the weekends with me. He always appreciated my cooking and often expressed gratitude for the chores I did. I felt blessed to have married such a man. Life was blissful, but there were two concerns. Firstly, even after 6 years of marriage, we couldn't have children. Bob would cheerfully reassure me, saying that kids are a blessing and would come when the time is right. While I wasn't too distressed about it, I increasingly felt the urge to start a family as I entered my 30s. At 30, the fact that we hadn't had kids began to worry me. I got some medical checkups, and everything seemed fine with my health. From these results, I realized that I had no choice but to be patient. While I still feel a bit anxious, I've started to calm down. The second issue was Catherine, Bob's childhood friend, who began visiting our home frequently and overstaying her welcome. This was a major concern for me. It's stressful having someone other than family around so often. After our wedding, Bob and I moved to a house in a location similar to Chicago, and, as it turned out, Catherine lived nearby. Since she worked at the same place as me, living close to the office made sense. Initially, due to the hustle and bustle of settling in, I didn't realize she was our neighbor. It took a year after our marriage to notice. Looking back, I think that's when the shadows started creeping into our happy marriage. At work, Catherine wasn't the nicest. When I switched from full-time to part-time after marriage, she made snide remarks. So, you're now part-time after getting married? Why don't you just quit? If you're gonna take maternity or parental leaves, won't that be a bother for the company? She always had a chip on her shoulder, especially towards married women colleagues. Naturally, I didn't like her. I've always found Catherine to be rather snarky, but since getting married, her attitude towards me worsened. There are times at work when I have to speak with her, and every time, she never misses a chance to throw a sarcastic comment. Even if I try to avoid her, she would deliberately find me and make her snide remarks. Because of this, my heart would sink every time I saw her. However, she's always been rude to other women at work, so she was pretty unpopular among the female staff. Thanks to that, other colleagues were on my side, assuring me not to take her comments to heart. This helped me stay positive. So, when Bob introduced her as his close childhood friend, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. We've known each other since we were kids. Can't believe we'd meet here. While Bob and I were out, we bumped into her, and she was all sweet and innocent in front of him. Oh my! It's been so long! I'm so surprised to see you here. I thought the last name sounded familiar, but never imagined you'd be married to Bob. With her cheerful demeanor and seemingly fresh attitude, I was taken aback. It was during this casual chat that I learned she lived nearby. Moreover, I had mentioned to Bob about her making snide remarks at work, and at that time, he was sympathetic. But upon learning that the sarcastic colleague was his childhood friend, he refused to believe me.
She might be a bit straightforward sometimes, but she's a kind person. You're probably overthinking it.
Bob dismissed my concerns, saying I was just imagining things. It seemed he had taken her side, having not seen her for years. After that, she became even more hostile towards me at work. It didn't take long for my mild aversion to turn into strong dislike. And even though she lived in the neighborhood, her house was quite far from ours. Yet, she'd often come over, boasting about how close she and Bob were since they were kids. She would frequently hang out in front of our house, reminiscing about old times with Bob, which made me feel out of place. Especially when she'd give me this smug look, seeing Bob and her laughing and chatting. I felt like she had ulterior motives. It seemed like she was after my husband, which made me quite uneasy. Unaware of how I felt, my husband, reuniting with his childhood friend after a long time, got caught up in the nostalgia. Their conversation was lively, and he even suggested having dinner together.
Why not stay for dinner? Hold on, you can't just decide that all of a sudden.
I was the one preparing dinner, and the last thing I wanted was to cook for someone who constantly belittled me. Plus, the idea of having another woman, especially one who seemed to get along so well with my husband, over for dinner was unsettling. Moreover, her personality was off-putting.
But we just met after such a long time. What's the harm in it? Besides, I work a full-time job, unlike you who's just part-time, so I'm more exhausted.
Catherine added with a fake victim-like attitude, which gave me chills.
Come on, Catherine's my dear childhood friend. Don't treat her like that.
With both Bob and Catherine ganging up on me, I reluctantly agreed to cook dinner. While I was cooking, the two of them chatted away, ignoring me. I felt resentment not just towards the inconsiderate colleague but also towards Bob, who wouldn't stand up for me even at home. During dinner, they continued their chat, ignoring me completely. And to top it off, Catherine criticized my cooking, with Bob not uttering a word in my defense.
It tastes bland. Don't you have any sauces or something? Get it for me.
She kept ordering me around, and with Bob taking her side, I couldn't relax throughout dinner.
Thanks for the meal. I'll come again. Sure, you're always welcome.
And just like that, as she was leaving, they made plans for her to visit again. Their complete disregard for my feelings left me exasperated, and I let out a sigh. After she left, I told Bob that I wanted this to stop.
Hey, can you please stop inviting Catherine over to our house? I have to prepare everything, and she always throws shade at me during her visits.
I just couldn't handle another exhausting meal like that, both physically and mentally. It's already hard seeing her at work, and having to deal with her at home too is just too much stress. I just want some peace when I'm at home.
You jealous or something? Don't worry, it's not like that.
But it seemed Bob didn't get what I was trying to say. He looked rather pleased, thinking I was just being jealous of his close bond with Catherine. She's pretty attractive, and it looked like Bob was enjoying the perceived competition between the two of us.
That's not the point.
Even when I pointed out how she's always been passive-aggressive at work and continued to show hostility towards me, Bob didn't seem to take me seriously.
You're overthinking it.
I know Bob saw how she treated me, but he just brushed it off, not considering how I felt. After that, Bob kept inviting her over, and Catherine would happily come without any hesitation. Doesn't she know when to hold back? Despite my constant objections, Bob never listened. He started giving in to her whims more and more. Catherine soon started to act as if she owned the place, and Bob just let her. I was getting really fed up with both of them. Initially, she would come over once a month for dinner. But that frequency increased, and she started showing up weekly. Every time I told Bob to stop inviting her, but he always sided with Catherine.
We are spending a lot on food with her coming over so often. You need to tell her to cut back. She's been like a sibling to me since we were kids. You don't need to be so hostile.
Bob prioritized Catherine over me, not considering my feelings. And as time went on, every time I objected, Bob would just get more annoyed. With Bob acting this way, Catherine would look at me smugly as she made herself at home. Amidst all this, I caught a glimpse of evidence that made me believe Bob was cheating on me. One day, a notification popped up on Bob's phone screen, and I happened to see the content of the message. The sender was Catherine, who was already uncomfortably close to my husband, so I figured they'd be in touch. But the content was suspicious.
Had a great time last Sunday. Let's do it again.
That Sunday, Bob told me he had to work the entire day. And typically, I have weekends off from my job. That's when I realized Bob and Catherine might have been meeting up behind my back. Curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to snoop on his phone while he was asleep. The password was his birthday. Seemed simple and careless, but it worked in my favor right then. On checking, I found out that Bob was using work as an excuse, creating an alibi, and meeting up with Catherine. Going through the messages, it seemed like they've been seeing each other for at least the past 3 years. Thinking back, Bob hadn't been as considerate as he was when we first got married. He used to help around the house, but that stopped. I thought it might have been due to increased work hours and fatigue. But now it seems those overtime hours might have been a lie. Around that time, Catherine started visiting us more often, and though we didn't have out-and-out fights, our arguments became more frequent. I was frustrated that Bob wasn't standing up for me against Catherine. I never imagined he could be cheating, so all this information was a massive blow. Although I believed they were having an affair, I still wanted to trust Bob, and so I was conflicted. Then one evening, when I was working late, I happened to see them walking arm in arm. I had told Bob about working late, and he said he'd dine out. So, I was focused solely on my work. But on my way home, as darkness settled, a loving couple walked past me. I was distractedly looking around when I recognized the couple in front of me. To my shock, it was my husband, Bob, and a colleague of his, Catherine. My heart nearly stopped. They were engrossed in their conversation and didn't notice me. I quickly hid. They were walking arm in arm, clearly very close to each other. I discreetly followed them to gauge the situation, and it was evident that they were quite intimate. Eventually, they entered a hotel, confirming my worst suspicions. Seeing them together was heartbreaking. Given Bob's recent behavior, I decided I'd had enough and was determined to get a divorce. One day, I discovered I was pregnant. Initially, I thought I was just tired from handling both work and secret divorce preparations. But the symptoms felt exactly like a pregnancy, so I went to the doctor, and sure enough, I was. Finding out about the pregnancy while contemplating a divorce was ironic. Despite everything, I had always wanted a child, so there was a part of me that was happy, even if Bob was the father. I decided to tell him about the pregnancy. My resolve to divorce hadn't wavered, but there was still a small hope he might end his affair upon hearing the news. But Bob's reaction was unbelievable.
What? Pregnant now? After all these years without any hint of it? Are you sure it's mine? What are you talking about? It's definitely yours. Who else could it be?
I was devastated by Bob's response. Bob had the audacity to doubt my fidelity, and his disgust was palpable. I was deeply disappointed in him. Just because he's cheating doesn't mean he can assume I'm doing the same. It makes me sick to think that way.
Just because you've been unfaithful doesn't mean I have. How could I possibly have another man's child while we're married?
His ridiculous attitude angered me, and I snapped back. Yet he persisted, either implying I was lying or having an affair, so I ended the conversation. My anger towards his affair was already there, but him doubting me over the pregnancy amplified those feelings. I swore to myself that when I brought up the divorce, I'd make sure they both got what they deserved. When the time was right, with all the evidence of their affair laid out on the table, I brought up the divorce. Given my investigations, they had been having an affair for 4 years, so there was plenty of documentation.
You think you can just lay all this out and blame someone else?
Bob insinuated that since Catherine was an old friend, I was probably fabricating evidence out of jealousy.
Yeah. You're just jealous because we're close, aren't you? Stop playing these childish games.
Catherine chimed in, echoing Bob, even suggesting I owed them for the emotional distress they supposedly endured. At first, they didn't admit to the affair. Instead, they tried to make me out to be the bad guy, so I calmly pointed out all the evidence. Since I had been keeping a diary, I had all the dates and events well recorded. They had been using work as an excuse to meet, but I countered all their excuses. With the compiled evidence, they seemed to accept the reality, at least momentarily, looking a bit flustered. But soon after, they seemed to double down, with an almost triumphant look, blaming me even more. You think after 6 years of marriage, it's my fault we didn't have a kid?
You should be grateful Bob stayed married to you this long. And yet you dare accuse us of an affair.
They had the audacity to claim that the reason for my husband's affair was my fault, conveniently excusing themselves from any blame. They even began to criticize me for being a bad wife and verbally berated me with nasty comments. I never expected them to be this unreasonable, and I looked at them in disbelief, as if they were from another planet. Perhaps because I was visibly shocked, they seemed to think I was hurt. Despite being the ones in the wrong, they had the nerve to act as if they'd forgive me if I apologized then and there. But with the way they were talking, it seemed they'd be more willing to agree to a divorce.
I don't need a husband like you.
With that, I handed him a business card of a divorce attorney and told him that from now on, we'll be discussing our divorce through the lawyer.
You really gonna go through with this divorce? Who's gonna want an older woman like you? You'll regret it.
Surprisingly, even after having an affair, he seemed hesitant to divorce. For a moment, I couldn't understand why he was reluctant. Then it dawned on me, I had been handling most of the household tasks. Without me, he wouldn't have it easy anymore. While he used to help out with chores when we first got married, in recent years, it was all on me while he spent time with Catherine. He probably didn't want to give up the comfortable life he had been enjoying with me around, taking care of everything. It seemed less about any lingering feelings for me and more about convenience. It didn't seem like I had any lingering affection for him. I had already given up on my husband, and this just deepened my disappointment.
I don't want to spend another moment with you.
So, I firmly told my hesitating husband that I wanted to move on swiftly. He surprisingly smirked, looking triumphantly smug, and Catherine told me to get out immediately.
You're no longer entitled to be in this house after the divorce. Get out now. And don't leave a single piece of trash behind, you worthless wife.
Catherine probably always despised me and seemed to expect that I'd come crawling back in desperation. Her words seemed to ignite something in my ex-husband, and his face twisted with a mix of frustration and hope, thinking I'd beg him.
That's right. You're not a wife anymore, so get out now. If you're gonna have a hard time, we can reconsider the divorce.
They looked down at me, smirking and laughing together. But I had already planned to move out immediately after confronting them about the affair and finalizing the divorce. So, their antics had no effect on me.
Of course, I plan to move out immediately. I'll clean up and move today.
Seeing my bright smile, they looked taken aback, clearly not expecting this response. Ignoring them, I made a phone call. Soon after, trash removal and moving services arrived and started taking out items from the house under my direction.
What the hell is going on?
They were initially shocked, but as movers began preparing to take out major appliances and furniture like the TV, sofa, and refrigerator, panic set in.
Hey, that furniture is mine. What do you think you're doing? You think you can just take things from this house? You have no right.
As more and more belongings were taken out, the two tried to stop the process, but I intervened.
Oh, remember you told me not to leave a single piece of trash behind? I'm making sure to follow your words to the letter.
I replied with a hint of sarcasm. Since my ex-husband and I jointly bought the furniture and appliances, I was well within my rights to take them. Catherine was quick to state that they didn't want anything I used, and while my ex looked like he wanted to say something, he kept quiet. I also took items my parents had given me when we got married, and soon, the house was almost empty. All that remained was stuff related to his work and hobbies. With most of the essential items gone, but leaving it behind felt liberating. As I was leaving with a clear mind and heart, Catherine, in her ever-smug fashion, said,
"Well, good luck with your single life, I guess?"
She probably felt triumphant, thinking my ex-husband chose her over me. Standing confidently at the front door, I decided to drop a truth bomb on them.
"I'll contact you later regarding compensation for the emotional distress, property division, and child support. Make sure you pay promptly."
The two seemed to be caught off guard, not expecting to have to pay compensation, and expressed their shock.
"What? You're after money now? Who do you think you are? Just a gold digger after all, wicked woman."
They were pleased about choosing the furniture and appliances together, but realizing they'd have to shell out for compensation meant they might not be able to buy what they wanted. Moreover, they seemed to doubt my pregnancy, and my ex-husband was furious, thinking he wouldn't need to pay child support.
"I was the one cheated on, so I have the right to compensation. I've already hired an attorney, so be prepared."
Mentioning an attorney, my ex-husband's face turned pale, probably recalling my father's profession. When I decided on the divorce, I was still shocked by my husband's infidelity and wanted to share my feelings with someone and calm down. I couldn't complain to my close colleagues, fearing it would reach the two of them. It would be careless to confide in friends who were mutual with my husband. So, I called my parents for advice. "Hello, it's been a while. I have something I need to talk about. Is now a good time?"
"Oh, what's the matter?"
My mother answered the phone, and her gentle voice almost made me tear up, but I managed to talk about my husband. His childhood friend worked with him, and she constantly made snide remarks and even started coming to our home. Instead of addressing her behavior, my husband blamed and criticized me. Recalling the events before discovering the affair, I became more emotional than I realized. Eventually, I told her everything up to the affair and my decision to divorce. My mother listened patiently, and after I finished, she expressed her anger at my husband's infidelity and concern for me. Feeling a bit better, I began to prepare for the divorce. After that phone call, my dad, who had gotten wind of the situation, reached out. He firmly assured me that he would help with the divorce proceedings, which was quite comforting. The preparations went smoothly. Since my dad was an attorney, he introduced me to one skilled in divorces, and preparations for claiming alimony were already underway. He was quite furious at my ex-husband for his infidelity and was determined to make him regret his actions. Having done extensive research, he ensured that the alimony would be much higher than the usual amount, much to the shock of both parties involved.
"The amount you'll be paying is roughly around $40,000, he said.
The mental stress I endured, both from the infidelity and their prior treatment towards me, justified a higher than usual alimony, a decision already discussed with the lawyer.
"What? That'll empty out our savings. That's way too much, just for a little cheating."
Hearing the amount, both of them were reluctant to part with such a sum and started to complain. Both of them had steady jobs with salaries higher than mine, but their working hours had decreased lately, citing overtime as an excuse. I was aware that they'd been splurging quite a bit recently. So, this alimony amount was bound to hit them hard. With a smirk, I decided to drop another bombshell on them. During my investigation into their affair, I had unearthed a scandalous piece of information that could ruin them.
"Oh, by the way, did you know? Catherine can't get pregnant, and she's been seeing other men too." "What?"
My revelation visibly shocked my ex-husband. Catherine, looking pale, seemed not to have expected her secret to be outed. Seeing her reaction, my ex realized the truth in my words and confronted her.
That's not true. She's lying.
She never expected to be exposed here and panically denied it, but her frantic reaction pretty much screamed the truth. In my investigations into my husband's infidelity, I had found out that she was his mistress and had carefully tracked her actions. It turned out that she was exploiting her inability to conceive, engaging in affairs with men other than my husband. After our divorce, my husband had plans to remarry Catherine and even have children. Now realizing that their plans wouldn't pan out, he turned his anger towards her. He thought he knew her since they were childhood friends, but it turned out she wasn't who he thought she was. Ignoring their ensuing argument, I headed back to my parents' place. Later, I filed a claim for compensation for the mental stress they caused me. I also contacted my ex about child support and property division, but he was initially very reluctant. It seemed his reason for cheating was his desperation over our inability to have children. But upon learning about Catherine's condition, he broke up with her instantly. Unable to handle household chores on his own, he even tried to reconcile with me.
It's my kid, right? I broke up with her, so why don't we let bygones be bygones and live as a family of 3? It's better for the child to have a father, don't you think? He spewed out such nonsense and kept persistently contacting me.
He started blowing up my phone and texts, sending dozens of messages every day. When I checked one of the emails, it was clear he was only thinking of himself. So, the next time he called, I snapped back.
What the hell are you talking about now? If you really cared about our child, you wouldn't have cheated. It's better for the child not to have a father like you.
I firmly turned him down every time. Even after I threatened to talk to the police, he had the audacity to show up at my parents' house. I was terrified when he unexpectedly appeared there, but luckily both my parents were home and no problems occurred. Having been informed about his cheating and our past issues, my parents were furious with him. So, when he arrived, my parents confronted him with a fury.
You promised to make our daughter happy, and then you pull this crap? She ain't gonna end up with a selfish guy like you.
My father, his face red with anger, yelled at him.
After cheating on her, what the hell do you want now?
My mother, seemingly calm, asked with a piercing tone, and it felt like there was a dark aura around her. My parents, usually so gentle and kind, can be truly intimidating when angered. Especially my father, who used to be a lawyer, his presence in these situations is incredibly forceful. After being scolded by my parents, who knew all about his affairs and our marriage, I didn't hear from him again. Later, he paid the alimony and child support. It seemed he finally gave up. As for Catherine, it seemed she wasn't too keen on paying alimony either. She split from him and disappeared from the workplace. She made quite a scene when she left, and our neighbors knew about our situation since our arguments about the alimony took place outside. She already had a bad reputation, but with this scandal, it spread throughout the company. It would likely be hard for her to find another job in the same field. I couldn't reach her about the alimony, so I contacted her parents, who ended up paying. They heard the whole story, were quite angry with her, and apologized to me. Losing her parents' trust, she'll probably face challenges in the future. As for me, I'm peacefully living at my parents' house with my newborn child. The stress from my ex-husband's attempts to reconcile was tough, but having my child made things better. Being a single mom might be challenging, but with my savings, alimony, and child support, I don't have financial worries. Raising my child with the help of my parents might have its moments of anxiety, but it's a joy compared to the hardships of my married life. Looking forward, I want to enjoy watching my child grow and lead a genuinely happy life.